They took the daughter of the galaxy's deadliest human. The air on Erixa Prime was thick with tension, the neon lights of the sprawling city casting a harsh glow over the dark underbelly of the galaxy's most corrupt trade hub. Somewhere, deep within the labyrinth of crime and deceit, an innocent girl sat bound to a chair, her small face set in defiance despite the danger surrounding her. Her captors, a band of ruthless mercenaries known as the Shadow Vipers, exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard the stories, rumors of a man so dangerous that even the most hardened warlords trembled at his name, but they had dismissed those tales as exaggerated myths. Now, they weren't so sure. In the cold vacuum of space, a sleek black starship approached Erixa Prime at impossible speed. Its pilot, Alexander Kane, was a legend, and for good reason. Once a highly decorated soldier, Kane had left the military after a mission gone wrong left his wife dead. Since then, he had roamed the galaxy, a one-man force of destruction against those who dared to cross him. And now, they had taken his daughter. Kane's fingers danced over the controls with precision as his ship broke through the planet's atmosphere. His face was a mask of cold fury, his piercing eyes locked on the city below. He had tracked the Shadow Vipers across 3 systems, dismantling their network piece by piece until only this last stronghold remained. He had given them a chance to return her. They hadn't listened. They were about to regret it. The Shadow Viper's leader, Rax, leaned back in his chair, an arrogant grin on his scarred face. "Relax," he said to his crew. "Kane's just a man, a dangerous man, sure, but we've got the numbers and the firepower. He won't get past our defenses." His confidence wavered, however, when the power in their hideout suddenly cut out. The lights flickered, then went dark. The air was filled with the ominous hum of a ship overhead. Moments later, the sound of explosions ripped through the silence. "What the?" Rax began, but his words were drowned out by the deafening crash of a wall collapsing. Kane stepped through the smoke, a towering figure clad in black combat armor. His every movement radiated lethal precision. In his hand was a plasma rifle, but it was his steely glare that made the mercenaries freeze in their tracks. "You've made a terrible mistake," Kane said, his voice calm but dripping with menace. The room erupted into chaos. The mercenaries opened fire, but Kane was faster. He moved like a shadow, weaving through the barrage of lasers with impossible agility. Each shot he fired found its mark, dropping his enemies with ruthless efficiency. One by one, the mercenaries fell, their bravado crumbling into panic. Rax, now pale with fear, grabbed the girl and held a blade to her throat. "Stay back, Kane," he shouted, "or she dies." Kane's eyes narrowed. "You think that will save you?" Before Rax could react, a small drone flew in from behind, disarming him with a precise electric jolt. The blade clattered to the floor as Kane closed the distance in a heartbeat, slamming Rax against the wall with a single hand. "You don't touch my daughter," Kane growled, his voice low and deadly. Rax tried to stammer out a plea, but Kane didn't bother to listen. With one swift motion, he knocked the man unconscious and turned to his daughter. "Dad," she cried, tears streaming down her face. Kane's expression softened as he knelt to untie her. "I'm here, Lily, you're safe now." As he lifted her into his arms, the sounds of distant sirens filled the air. The authorities were finally arriving. Drawn by the destruction Kane had left in his wake, he carried Lily back to his ship, the chaos of the hideout fading behind him. As the starship ascended into the sky, Lily looked up at her father. "Are the bad guys gone?" "They won't bother us again," Kane said, his tone firm but reassuring. Because if there was one truth in the galaxy, it was this: you don't mess with Alexander Kane or his family. And everyone who had learned that lesson the hard way was no longer around to tell the tale. They took the daughter of the galaxy's deadliest human, Part 2. The Shadow Viper's stronghold lay in ruins, smoldering under Erixa Prime's neon-lit skies. Kane piloted his stealth cruiser, Erebus, into orbit, the adrenaline of the rescue slowly ebbing as his daughter, Lily, rested in the co-pilot's seat. She clutched a stuffed bear, one he always made sure was with her on their rare outings to safer worlds. "You okay, kiddo?" Kane asked, his voice softer now. She nodded, though the fear in her eyes lingered. "I knew you'd come." Kane's lips tightened into a faint smile, his hand brushing her hair. "Always." The moment was interrupted by the sharp chime of a proximity alarm. Kane glanced at the display. 3 ships, fast and armed to the teeth, were closing in. A cold recognition settled over him as their insignias lit up on the screen: Crimson Talons. The Crimson Talons weren't just mercenaries, they were bounty hunters, elite ones, and they weren't here by chance. A message crackled through the comms: Alexander Kane, you are in violation of galactic law, stand down and prepare to be boarded. Lily gripped his arm, her voice trembling. Dad, what do we do? Kane's calm demeanor didn't waver. What we always do, Lily, we fight back. The Erebus was built for speed and stealth, not full-scale combat, but Kane knew how to turn its disadvantages into lethal advantages. He flipped a series of switches, rerouting power from non-essential systems to the shields and weapons. Lily, strap in tight, he instructed, his tone steady but urgent. The first enemy ship fired a salvo of plasma rounds, lighting up the void. Kane rolled the Erebus sharply, evading the blasts with precision. He unleashed a volley of EMP missiles, disabling one of the ships before it could react. Nice try, Kane muttered as the enemy vessel spun helplessly out of control. The remaining two ships tightened their formation, trying to box him in. Kane's fingers flew over the controls, rerouting power to the thrusters. He slammed the Erebus into a sudden reverse thrust, letting the ships overshoot him. Let's see how you handle this, he said, firing a concentrated beam of ion energy. The second ship exploded in a brilliant flash, leaving only one left. But the final ship was faster and more aggressive, its pilot clearly a cut above the rest. It darted around Kane's counterattacks, returning fire with deadly precision. The Erebus shuddered as a plasma bolt grazed its hull, the cockpit lights flickering. Lily's eyes were wide with fear. Dad, I've got this, Kane assured her, his voice unwavering. He executed a risky maneuver, cutting all power to the engines for a split second and letting the ship drift. The sudden deceleration threw the enemy pilot off, giving Kane just enough time to lock on. With a squeeze of the trigger, he fired a high-yield missile directly into the ship's engines. The last enemy vessel erupted into flames, debris scattering into the void. Kane exhaled, but the fight wasn't over yet. Back at the Erebus tactical console, Kane's suspicions were confirmed. The bounty hunters hadn't acted alone. A distress beacon had been activated during the skirmish, alerting a much larger force to his location. The beacon's signal belonged to a name Kane hadn't encountered in years: the Syndicate, a sprawling criminal empire with its claws in every corner of the galaxy. If they were involved, it meant this wasn't just about him. Lily, he said, his tone turning serious, there's something I need you to do. She tilted her head, confused. What is it? I'm taking you to a safe house, somewhere they can't find you, Kane said, but I'll have to go deal with this myself. Her small hands balled into fists. No, I'm not leaving you. Kane crouched down in front of her, his hands resting on her shoulders. Lily, I need you to trust me. These people, they won't stop, not unless I stop them first. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. Okay, Dad. The safe house wasn't much, a hidden bunker on a backwater moon with automated defenses, but it was enough to keep Lily safe. After tucking her in and leaving her a communicator linked only to him, Kane set his sights on his next destination, the Syndicate's central hub. They had crossed a line. Taking his daughter was a declaration of war, and Kane was more than ready to finish what they'd started. The galaxy's deadliest human wasn't just coming for them. He was bringing hell with him. They took the daughter of the galaxy's deadliest human. Part 3. The Syndicate's central hub wasn't a simple fortress, it was an entire space station, Krithos Prime orbiting a dying star, a gleaming, brutalist monstrosity of steel and plasma shielding. It was said to be impenetrable. It had to be. The Syndicate's leadership, a council of 12 ruthless crime lords, ran their vast empire from within its armored walls. For most, the thought of attacking Krithos Prime was madness. But Alexander Kane wasn't most people. The Erebus hung in the shadows of a debris field just outside the station's sensor range. Kane studied the station's schematics on his console, acquired through a mix of hacking and old-fashioned intimidation. Its defenses were formidable: automated gun turrets, fighter squadrons, and a fleet of cruisers patrolling the perimeter. Subtlety isn't an option, Kane muttered, activating his ship's stealth systems. He set the Erebus on a collision course toward the station, using the debris field as cover. The plan was simple: punch a hole, infiltrate, and make the Syndicate pay for their mistake. Inside Krithos Prime, the Syndicate Council gathered in their opulent chamber. Holograms of the destroyed Shadow Viper hideout and the bounty hunters' failed assault flickered before them. "This man has cost us resources, ships, and personnel," snarled Galtos, a hulking reptilian figure who served as the Council's enforcer. "We should have killed him years ago." "Perhaps, but he was more useful as a ghost," said Serana, a cold-eyed human who oversaw the Syndicate's intelligence network. "His legend kept smaller rivals in line. Now, he's a liability." The Council's leader, a shadowy figure known only as Vaughn, raised a hand for silence. "Enough." Kane's anger blinds him. "He'll come here, and when he does, we will crush him." As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the station. "What is it?" Vaughn demanded. A panicked officer's voice came through the comms. "Sir, an unidentified ship has breached the perimeter. It's..." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. The Council exchanged uneasy glances. They knew exactly who it was. The Erebus slammed into the station's outer hull, its nose burrowing deep into the structure. Emergency bulkheads sealed off the breach, but Kane was already inside, his armor-clad form emerging from the smoke with deadly intent. He moved like a wraith through the corridors, dispatching guards with brutal efficiency. Syndicate security forces tried to contain him, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Kane's advanced combat training, combined with his relentless determination, made him unstoppable. By the time he reached the command center, the floor was littered with bodies, and the remaining guards had fled. The council chamber's massive doors burst open, and Kane strode in, his plasma rifle raised. The council members froze, their bravado evaporating in the face of the living legend. "Kane," Vaughn said, his voice calm despite the situation, "you've proven your point, let's talk." Kane's icy glare swept across the room. "You took my daughter." Serana stepped forward, her hands raised in mock surrender. "It was a mistake, we can compensate." Kane's rifle discharged, the blast reducing her to ash. "No negotiations," he said coldly. Chaos erupted, the council members scattered, but Kane was faster, his movements were surgical, each shot precise and devastating. Galtos lunged at him, but Kane sidestepped the brute's charge and drove a combat knife into his chest. Within moments, only Vaughn remained, standing at the far end of the chamber. "You think killing us will stop the Syndicate?" Vaughn sneered. "Another will rise in our place." "Let them try," Kane said, his voice a low growl. He fired. With the council eliminated, Kane activated the station's self-destruct sequence. Alarms blared as he made his way back to the Erebus, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. As the Erebus sped away, Krithos Prime erupted into a brilliant explosion, the dying star consuming the remains of the station. Back at the safe house, Lily ran into her father's arms the moment he stepped inside. "You're back," she cried, holding him tightly. "I told you I'd come back," Kane said, lifting her into his arms. "Are the bad guys gone?" she asked. "They won't bother us anymore," he said, his voice steady but laced with exhaustion. For the first time in days, Kane allowed himself a small smile. He had won this battle, but deep down, he knew the galaxy was still full of dangers. But as long as he had Lily, he would face them all, and win. Because no one took what belonged to Alexander Kane and lived to tell the tale.